keep their pregnancy and maybe can't afford or have the means to provide for, we provide those funds as well. That also includes traditional ceremonies, if there's like doulas, traditional medicines, things like that, that's also covered. And then lastly, we have our Moon Pie Fund, which is a menstrual hygiene product fund, which also provides contraception and also menopause products and support through that. And so all of these funds are actually found on iwrising.org, where you can apply for any of the funding, and we provide that. And so if you know of any of your relatives or friends who are in need of any of these, we're here for that support. And again, iwrising.org. We also have some stuff on the left side of the room, just a few things such as hand sanitizers. We have period product bags if anyone wants to take them. Everything up there is free. We also have just cards and some literature, in-house design literature, so feel free at any point to go check it out, especially afterwards. And we have, those available. So we get into the topic at hand, right? We're here to talk about media. Why do we cover media, right? We kind of, as Indigenous Women Rising, we consider ourselves sort of experts when it comes to media. We've developed a pretty strong media team that we, consists of artists, but also those who are aware and literate in the sense of the evolving changes, right, that media involves. It's surrounding all of us constantly. We're not going backwards in time where we all have to face, the changes of media specifically. So we want to just talk about, what that means, understanding those changes, and how to properly kind of digest what's going on, right, in a way that we can productively move forward in understanding, and we're not being fed information that's false. But just really quickly, like what is media? Like what can we say about media? What type of media do we often hear of? Yep, social media, absolutely. We would definitely include social. What other forms of media? The news, yep. Television news, definitely. Radio, yeah. Yep, radio is a big form of media still, for sure. Yeah. So we're gonna cover all of those sources along, even with like the newer forms like podcasts. There's even newer forms of social media that we are faced with today, newsletters, printed works, all of that. So we'll go ahead and get next slide. The definition of media literacy that we define is that it is the ability to assess, analyze, evaluate, create, and act using all forms of communication, right? All the forms that we just named. It involves speaking critically about media messages, again, such as news, advertisements, social media, definitely social media, to understand their purpose, identify bias, and evaluate their influence on thoughts and behaviors. Seeing what it is that is being put out, and also evaluating and seeing through the exact information that we are receiving. Media literacy, it isn't just nice to have, right? It's not something that we just want to talk about. It's something that we believe is essential for surviving and thriving in a world that's just overflowing with information, right? An ever-changing society of technology, whether we like it or not, right? Some of us don't like having technology. We want to avoid having our phones all the time, but the reality is that it just exists, right? Whether we partake or not, it's something that we want to just be able to have as an essential tool moving forward. So, in a similar question, what do you all use to receive the news? Are there any specific platforms or outlets that you receive the news for? Feel free to shout it out.
Social media.
Social media, same. Yeah, I think I use social media too for my main source.
We have a radio station. It's called KJK. It's like English and Navajo.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
A lot of our community use that station a lot.
KJK? Is that, okay, KJK, yeah, radio station. Definitely radio. That's I notice for those who don't Bluetooth the music to work, that's the time we receive news. Yeah, what else? I think I heard some more.
I still watch cable.
Cable, yeah, absolutely. Cable news is super effective. Channel 7, yeah, that's real. Like, that's all of every single media outlet that we receive, right? We're being fed information. And this will all help kind of hopefully distinguish by like biases, and also in this world AI, right? And the things that we are like, whoa, is that real? Is that not real? Things like that. So we'll definitely cover that. Next slide. So one thing that we like to keep in mind, right, when we're receiving the news from the different outlets, you know, they're all on the same level of how we receive them in terms of platform. But we're constantly exposed, right, to false or misleading information. We hear there's a lot of political biases, along with just cultural biases, dominant cultural norms that are established on our communities, which may not resonate, right, with our communities because we're not all the same. We, on social media, websites, news outlets, and even advertising, one thing that we, or I guess three things that we want to just stress is to question the source of information, right? Where is this information coming from? Not the platform itself, such as the radio, news, social media, but who it's coming from, right? Where is this info originating from? We encourage to check for bias, manipulation, or incomplete narratives, right? So anything that feels like it is opinion-based or driven to persuade your thinking or your political view or cultural view, that's something that we always want to make sure is covered. The last point is to spot fake news and conspiracy theories, right? We hear a lot of news from maybe politicians or about medical issues that may just be there to scare us, right? To influence our fear so that we either vote for them, or if we stop using a product, or if it's even like sports related or recreational related, you know, there's always these competitive forms of manipulation or conspiracy just to make people feel that emotion and connect to it. So that's something that we want to also bring out. And I think in light of all of this, to transition, there's, you know, the question, like, why do we feel like we need to be informed? What is it that makes us feel like we need to be fed the right in our mind, the correct content? So I'll go ahead and pass it. Is this the key to pass? Okay, mental health. Yeah. So next slide. So we believe it is important because, of course, you know, we want to become informed, being understanding of what's being said to us is completely about information. Detecting misinformation, right? Knowing when something is just being made up or maybe something isn't true and something that we know for a fact. Creating ethical and responsible media. So even us as creators, right? Though we often consider ourselves as consumers to media, like we hear things like when we're watching Channel 7 or listening to the radio in the morning, like we're taking in everything that's being said. But in hindsight too, we are also creators, right? If any of us have social media, if we use Facebook, if we use anything that we put our thoughts on, whether it's writing, pictures, videos, that, you know, is again all in tune to creating ethical and responsible media. Protecting mental health, this is a big one. I think we've all heard those ads where it's like, if you or your loved ones have been exposed to social media addictions, then you may be, you know, qualified for some compensation. Mental health is definitely a part of media literacy and understanding what is true. Understanding bias and perspective, again, going back to political specific information being fed to us, weather information, you know, it could be anything. It doesn't have to just be political centered. And then preparing for real life work, right? This is for a lot of us as we're ever changing. This is also for students to keep in mind of what we're doing really does impact the future, right? And how we consume social media and how that looks like moving forward. Being informed is essential. Media literacy enables us to engage in meaningful political and social discussions. I know the Western idea of politics often doesn't serve our communities, right? It doesn't speak to our communities directly, but in a sense of understanding of what is happening, regardless of impact, it is essential to know what's being said and how to identify whether something is being, again, twisted or if it's something's being misleading. It also enables us to evaluate policy arguments and campaign messages. Reading campaign messages, we have a lot of elections coming up, specifically the New Mexico governor elections coming up. So there's a lot of campaign messages. We see that every year for even presidential campaigning. And also it enables us to vote based on facts, right? Not on hype or fear, but really what is true and how we can actually verify the information is true. So next. So I will pass it over to Mallery, our caseworker, who works directly with mental health, to discuss some of the impacts on how social media and media literacy as a whole impacts them.
Okay, so I'm guilty of this. I watch TikTok, and if I don't set a timer for myself, I'm up till 3 in the morning and I feel terrible the next day. I also have to set a screen time for my daughter because she will do the same thing and she's 13. Social media and constant exposure can be bad for our mental health. So setting boundaries like mine with my time, my screen time, or pay attention to, hey, at 11 o'clock, I'm gonna stop scrolling. It doesn't always work, but I try. And understanding how media can influence the way you think about yourself. There's this quote I often think of, which is, comparison is the thief of joy. If you're constantly exposed to, even if they are positive, but you're like, dang, these people have a nice house. Oh, this lady is so pretty. And I think about like my daughter, like, why don't I look like that? Why does my makeup not look like that? Why don't we have this? That can be harmful. So I guess just learning to love yours and what you have. Also, it's not real. Of course, they're going to only show the positive stuff. So just that. And then recognizing manipulative content. I was actually kind of frustrated. I was scrolling Facebook and then I saw a news story from like a local news channel, and it was like the sensationalized headline, and I clicked on it and it wasn't even in our state, and I'm like, why is this on here? And how is this relevant to me? So just recognizing those things, or if you see a video and it has like this image and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to watch that, and you click on it and it's like nothing. So just recognizing those things. So what do you think it means to create responsible media? There was a post last year about a pumpkin patch, and it like really kind of attacked the owner, and I shared it without thinking, without it being verified. And I felt kind of bad because I'm like, oh, I should have looked into it more. But the language in the post was so like, it got my attention, and I shared it, and I didn't realize how harmful that could have been. So I was irresponsible in creating media. So we think about that too, whether you have Facebook, Instagram, whatever, it's so easy to click share without thinking. So we just don't consume the media, we create it too. Whether you're sharing a picture of your kids, your dog, whatever, your food. But you know, any thought you put out there, that's creating content. And also respecting the intellectual, property of other people, whether you're sharing or copying their art. There's like copyright laws, trademark laws, and we don't want to get in trouble for that. I know that there have been like Native artists that got in trouble for using like team logos, or they can't, sell that at like an arts and crafts center.
Please excuse this interruption. There will be a 4-H meeting this Thursday afternoon in the library conference room with Ms. Morse. Eat lunch first, then meet at 12:20. We will collect membership applications, discuss summer opportunities. If you're interested in the New Mexico State University Youth Branch Camp, please make a note. Deadline is May 1st to apply. Thank you.
I'm calling for AI, so I'm not going to do this part.
Yeah, so how do we recognize AI-generated content? Who knows what AI is, by the way? Yeah, it's kind of hard to miss, right? It's everywhere now, it's crazy. It's like images, it's audio, it's everything from even written content now, ChatGPT, right? All of these different things. AI is kind of a big blanket skill set that exists. And so, how to recognize AI-generated content. Tips for recognizing AI content is, of course, looking closely at details, right? AI images, they often have like minor glitches, like you can see like body parts such as hands, teeth, even if there's like font in the image or video that seems a little off, mismatched shadows, things like that. You know, those are all of the details that we want to stress when we're looking at media to begin with, right? Those are just initial like, hey, that doesn't seem right. That should raise questions or red flags right away. Another thing is to check the source, right? If an image or video isn't credited to a specific source or outlet, we have to trace it back by using reverse image search. I don't know if anyone's aware of reverse image searching, but if you have an image or if you see an image or someone sends you, even scammers use images that aren't originally taken, you can actually grab that
one more
image.
quick reminder. This is Cronin's second hour. We'll report to Mr. Jim's class. That is not on the sign. There's the smiley face. So if you have Mrs. Cronin's second hour, please report to Mr. Jim's class. Thank you.
Sweet. So that, if you save an image or if you get that image and you put it into your Google search engine, it'll actually pull up all of related images, and if it is grabbed from somewhere, it'll actually trace it back to its original source. There's also taglines, which we'll show an example of shortly, of AI-generated content, right? If you're on social media, oftentimes if you go to the comments, Meta or different apps kind of put in this disclaimer like this content has been generated by AI, right? Using whatever AI platform. Those are always good to keep an eye out for. Listen and watch for oddities, right? In AI-generated video or audio, you can hear the differences in the voices that are being spoken. You can tell it's a computer, right? Sometimes I know there's also ability that goes into that, right? Hard hearing community members may have a harder time catching those subtleties. So that also just comes with, you know, following like lip movements, and if you need help or if you see somebody like an elder or anyone who is hard hearing, you know, watching something and taking it for fact, it's good to kind of step in and be like, hey, let's talk about how that might not be true, right? Kind of showing up as a support system in that sense as well. And then lastly, you know, to recognize AI-generated content, we just recommend pausing before sharing. Like Mal just explained, like sharing stuff without thinking, and then we find out later it's false, right? And then now our followers might not trust the content we share because it's not real or it became not real. So just taking a moment, try to verify, try to cross-reference, because once it's posted, even if we delete it, right, everything exists and it remains in the internet forever. And people can always screenshot stuff, they memorize too, so just because it's deleted doesn't mean it's gone forever. Yeah, so here are some examples. I'll just talk about this picture here, and then I'll pass it to Mal to give some examples over here. I know it's really small to read if you're in the back. But this is an example that
all poor thing, she looks so scared, all of this stuff, and that's what it's meant to do, whether it's good or negative emotions. Because I've definitely fallen for AI, so you know, I'm not feeling like stupid that it's happening, but just being more aware of it. Because I'm like, what do you mean that cat can't play piano? So stuff like that.
No, that's real. Just kidding. Yeah, so we move into media landscape, right? So we recognize that AI is a part of that media landscape. We recognize false information, misleading information, bias, and also fact, right, is all involved in this media landscape. We want to kind of lay out just a little percentages of how we receive media. Social media is the top source now for news, right? That's across intergenerational. It's not just the youth, it's also adults as well, elderly as well. For the first time, more Americans say they get their news from social media and video networks, you know, like YouTube or if they're other streaming platforms. 54% then from TV and news, right? So TV is still existent, but it's only 50%. It's half the population than how we were probably as children. And then, of course, websites and apps, 48% as well. And all of this is really just to say, you know, again, social media really does influence how we view fact and real news or the opposite. So going into bias, right? So what is bias and what is perspective? How do we see these existing? Did you want to?
Yeah, I can do that.
So yeah.
Okay, so what is bias and what is perspective? Perspective is more neutral. There's context, there's knowledge behind it, and then bias is of course like one-sided, meant to sway you either way. So for example, we're in a school, I'm a teacher. As a teacher, I think that schools deserve more funding. That's my perspective. Because I'm a teacher, I have that context, I have that experience. And my bias is, oh, those stupid politicians didn't give us more funding. They're really dumb for not doing that. That's my bias. It has loaded language, and I'm picking a side. So those are the difference, between the two. Bias can be really out there in your face, or it can be really subtle. Like I said, I think it just has a lot to do with language. And then understanding the difference between opinion and fact. You can not like something, but it doesn't make it not true. So just thinking about those things. And also consider whose voices are included and excluded. I was talking to Marcus yesterday about, like, we think about when policies about Native people are first drafted. They didn't include Native people, they just kind of assumed what was good for us. So now when I look at something like an organization, I'm like, okay, if you're talking about Native people, do you have Native people in that space to offer that? So thinking about those things. So these are all the different news sources, and this is a media bias chart. So we have left, far left, left-leaning, center, right, and far right. So it is like conservative and liberal. And if you look, do you recognize any of the news sources you get your news from? Okay. So, of course, we look at CNN, it's more left-leaning. We look at Fox News, and it's more right-leaning. So this is a good chart to understand, like, what bias is going to be influenced if you get news from these news sources. In the center, see, they're more neutral. I use straight arrow news. It's actually really good because it also links to other websites and other news articles, and it'll tell you on the bottom which way it leans. So that's a good news source that I like. And you can find this image online if you want to look at it further.
Yeah, so, and also just to like disclaim too, this isn't to influence anybody on what newsrooms that we use. I know we all use different ones, especially like social media, same thing. So no, non-influential, just showing based off of what exists, right? So what are the signs of that a source is trustworthy? Trustworthy versus questionable outlets, right? Trustworthy outlets have clear editorial standards. They're transparent about corrections or errors that are made, and they name their journalists, right? Often when we go to a website and we're reading an article on something, even if it's actually on a radio too, they also disclaim where the research came from or who the journalist is. And you can see that both at the bottom and at the top of the header whatever article that you are reading from. They also cite sources and link original data, right? So they plug they cite their sources. Something that we were all taught to do, right, at a very young age when writing papers. So the other thing is questionable outlets often lack transparency. They rely on sensational language or have an obvious agenda, right? The example that Mal just gave of like, no, it's the dumb politicians that are making funding cuts rather than funding, like the school's funding has been cut for A, B, or C, right? Whatever reason that is provided. Usually that strong language is there to, again, invoke emotion, invoke this attitude that like, hey, I need to do something about it, whether or not it's true. The big difference, it isn't about whether, again, we agree with the source, right? It's about whether their information can be verified. How can we cross-reference verification? What does verification look like? What does that even mean, right? There's a new feature on social media that like an account can be verified with a little blue check mark. And that really, I think, in the sense of social media that verifies that it is a real person owning the account and not like a bot. Same thing with written data as well. Like things can be verified by knowing and understanding that this source or this news came from a human being, right? And they're owning up to it. They're taking responsibility for the information that is being said. Here are some tips, right, in also conducting or deciding whether or not something is trustworthy or questionable, is doing a quick search, right? Once you read something, you can Google search exactly that information or that topic at hand, and you can kind of compare what's being said about that topic you're reading about or listening or watching about. Conducting a simple search for information about news source, it's usually the first step that we take as an organization who pays attention to the changing media. Looking for standards, right? Reputable news organizations, they aspire for ethical guidelines and standards, right? Including fairness, accuracy, and independence, allowing people, their readers or viewers, to hear for what it is rather than influencing your opinion or your perspective based off of what's being shared. Checking for transparency, a big one. Quality news sources should always be transparent, not about reporting practices, but about their ownership and funding, right? Where is this how are we functioning as a newsroom, right? What makes what we're saying true? You know, what is the overall theme of character within a newsroom, a journalist, or a source that can provide that specific transparency and quality. A couple more on the next slide is to examine how errors are handled. So there are often examples, I can think of a couple from like the Albuquerque Journal and also the Santa Fe, the Santa Fe New Mexican. There's a couple of articles that they've printed out and distributed that had misleading information. And both newsrooms actually caught that, and they got feedback, right, from community members like, hey, that's not true. This is actually the opposite of what you put out. So their editorial editors and their journalists went back and republished and acknowledged their mistake, right? They're like, hey, this was wrong. Apologies for this mistake, but here is the facts, right? Here's what was corrected, and then they also published the original to make sure that the readers are seeing both. That is a healthy example, right, of a credible news source by just admitting where they were wrong, because the more that their community finds out that they didn't do that, the less trust they have, and then that's when a news source or a newsroom becomes unreliable, right, and non-trustworthy. The last tip is to just assess news coverage, right? An important step in vetting source is taking time to read and to just actually read the whole thing. I know that's hard sometimes in a busy schedule, in a busy world, but reading the full articles or looking for details that, might not, even if we disagree with them, it's good to still read the full thing, than to just read part and then share something that, again, is misleading. And remember, credible sources aren't perfect, but information from them is most likely to be accurate if they're transparent about their mistakes. That's the same with creators too. Us as creators who post stuff, we're not perfect, and sometimes we may say something that may be false. But again, going back and apologizing or acknowledging that equals transparency. Yes. So I'll go ahead and pass it. You want me to talk about the full three? So here are just a couple red flags. In headlines, authorship, and sourcing. All three of these exist, right, within media-specific intake. We have agenda setting, priming, and framing.
Yeah, I can.
So I'll pass to the expert on this to give more detail.
Okay, so I just wanted to go back to the previous slide because I just thought of an example as we were standing here. I used to have blue hair. And I was scrolling Instagram yesterday and I saw this thing and it says, a study shows that people with unnatural hair color have lower mental health outcomes. And I was like, what? So I scrolled down and the study was from OkCupid and I'm like, I don't think I'm gonna trust a dating website to tell me that my blue hair means I'm mentally ill. That came from my trauma, not from my hair. Anyway, so going back to this.
So this sounds like, oh, okay, well this just applies to news. This applies to a lot of media that we consume. So agenda setting, basically setting an agenda. This is what we're trying to sell you. This is, the things that we're going to go through. Priming, like to get you ready for it. And then framing, how we're going to make it look. So it kind of sounds confusing. But an example would be, you see a commercial on TV for a medication. And it's like, oh, you're dealing with this problem, take this medication, it's going to make your life so much better. And it shows these happy white people just like, oh my God, prancing through a field. Anyway, I'm married to a white man, so I can say that. Anyway, but yeah, they do that. They prime it, they set the agenda, they frame it. Then at the very end, in a very soft, quick voice, it's like, oh, by the way, you may poop your pants for a week straight, but this is great. And that's, what happens when we consume media is that agenda setting, priming, framing, because they want you to take in that media. They want it to influence you and kind of disregard the negative consequences, or tuck them in there, but don't make them stand out. So this is an example in news, and if you can see, there's the L, R, and L. These are news sources, and that's the bias that they have, which way they lean. And they're all covering the same topic. So from the center, it has more neutral language. Supreme Court rules that immigration raids in LA can continue. Straightforward to the point. We look at it from the right. Supreme Court allows Trump ICE raids to resume in California. From the left, Supreme Court lifts ICE migrant profiling ban in LA for now. So that's the first thing you read when you read a news article is the title, and that sets it up for you, that this is what's happening. The allows meaning like the Supreme Court condones what Trump is doing. From the left, this is just for now, this is just temporary. So just understanding and recognizing that language from the very beginning. So what is the difference between misinformation and disinformation? Next slide. So it's kind of a spectrum. Misinformation is false information, incorrect information that is given unintentionally. Disinformation is intentional. It's meant to cause harm. It's meant to give you the wrong information. So we can look at it from a spectrum here. So satire, parody. If you watch Saturday Night Live, if you read The Onion, or people even just joking about news, that is satire, that is misinformation, and it's not meant to harm people. But some people take it as true. Disinformation, way to the end, fabricated content. I don't know if you've ever seen AI videos of I can't remember the newscaster's name, but it's him talking, saying some outrageous stuff, and where it was what the heck, and then finding out it was AI. Or they clip videos of a person saying one terrible thing but don't include the whole context of it. So that happens. And then there's stuff in the middle, and then they can go either way. This isn't completely set, but these are just some examples of misinformation and disinformation. Okay. And then also considering numbers don't fully tell the story. I know we see statistics and stuff like that, and we think, oh, this is concrete. We see a number, and that's legit. But we also had to ask where, how, why, how was it done, how many people were included, what was the exact count? Because understanding these details are important. I was telling Marcus, I'm okay, I'm a Chicago Bears fan. My brother's a Green Bay Packers fan. So is that guy over there. But let's say I say, okay, well, there was a study done in the northwest part of the United States. Everybody thinks that Chicago Bears is the best team. I didn't tell you that I went to Chicago and I asked 10 people wearing Bears jerseys, who's the best team? But I gave you a number, 100%. I did a study. That's not legit. You have to question where that came from. Yes. Does anybody remember this? When they called us something else? From the exit polls? CNN, so we're all something else in here. Which is crazy, because CNN, this is CNN, what the heck are you guys doing? But it happens. And I used to watch CNN. So I was wow, That's pretty sad. So again, just look for what's missing, not what's shown. I give you the example of policies created about Native people with no Native people in the room. I think we all kind of experienced that. I'm glad that it's different now. It's still not great, but it's getting better. So data doesn't, tell us the full story. What wasn't included? If you look at peer-reviewed articles, especially students in the back when you go to college, if it's a good article, it'll include biases, it'll include the limitations. So look at those things. What didn't they have access to? Who didn't they talk to? Who aren't they talking about? And also don't assume precision equals truth. Just because a number looks precise doesn't make it true. Just signals. A lot of this stuff is estimates. Sometimes they don't, contact enough people. I was listening to a podcast about homelessness, and they were talking about it in New York City. And they're like, oh, there's like 11,000 homeless people. And they were talking about how people go in and count at the shelter. I'm like, how do you even keep count? Just stand there and maybe you count the same person twice. I don't know. So just understand that numbers aren't exactly precise, that they're more estimates. And that doesn't mean that they're true or correct. And also keeping in mind that you as content creators, adults sharing out, also your kids, that the internet is forever. We've heard about people, politicians, celebrities, even somebody you know, posting dumb stuff on the internet like, oh my God, I have my relative, and she posts all of her drama on Facebook, and I'm like, why are you doing this? People are gonna see this. And it's affected her business. Or you think about celebrities who's posted dumb stuff like 10, 15 years ago on Twitter, and it comes back up. This is forever. Your digital footprint, all of that information is stored, even private messages. I was telling Marcus, I was like, dang, listening to podcasts about true crime, and I'm like, these people were caught because their search history is like how to hide a body. So just stuff like that, considering, not saying plan that better, but but just understanding. And also websites capture and save your data. I mean, it's so crazy, you get all these advertisements and you're like, I just Googled that, I just talked about it, and it blows up your feed forever. So just understand that, it's constantly capturing your information and holding on to it. So just being mindful of what you share, what you post, what you put out there, because it can come back and bite you. But maybe I don't want to scare you, tell you not to do it. Just be more careful, more mindful.
Yeah, just to speak really quickly to website and browsing history and cookies. I know we always see the cookies notification on allowing all or limiting. That definitely plays a big role into surveillance capitalism. Capitalism as they keep your data, what you search, your interests, and then they try to send ads through different platforms, right? They sell your information for you to be attracted to whatever it is that you're looking up. For example, if you're really into shoes, right? Nike shoes, you're searching up specific shoe models. How many of us have gone to social media, a different platform, and then you get those, right? Or even if you say it out loud, yeah, you get them, it's weird. But that's where that comes into play. Surveillance capitalism, they're listening, they're paying attention to the data that you're inputting or speaking of on social media, and then they send you that, right, as ads for you to buy into as a consumer. That's where the capitalism part comes into. So they're benefiting off of your sold information without your consent, right? So there are a lot of laws being passed right now, or that are on the table at the legislative session this past year, that were talking about data privacy. It was called the NM CHISPA bill that we were a part of, but that does include that, right? We all deserve dignity and privacy, specifically within our tribal communities, because of the things that we hold sacred, or that don't include outside people that aren't from our communities. That is all a conversation still, right? To insert into that data protection. It's not just about surveillance capitalism, it's about cultural preservation and sustainability as well, right? Respect and cultural appropriate spaces and norms. But again, that all just goes back to keeping in mind what we're searching, what we're looking at, what we're putting out there, because it does exist, right? The digital footprint. So again, yeah, being mindful, and we have 5 minutes, and so this is actually our last slide. So we want to move into a Q&A. If there are any questions, comments, we're happy to answer. Yes.
I wanted to ask you about maybe you stated maybe the use of cookies and that notification that we get sometimes. This website uses cookies. Are you going to allow it, or what? What's your recommendation?
Yeah, my recommendation for not using cookies is to definitely deny them. I've been denying all the cookies or the cache, notifications when it comes up. I think one thing that Google and other platforms, engines are doing are they're trying to ask for consent. And sometimes there are some websites that still say only use necessary cookies. But to me, necessary cookies is still collecting data that they can use as necessary to sell, right? So one of the things that I do personally is I actually go incognito mode on Google or Safari, because it does mess with the location data. Oftentimes it'll say that I'm located in Nevada or Phoenix when I'm really here in New Mexico, right? That's a way that data can be at least kind of, it's not completely because they're still getting what you're searching, but it'll at least divert like where you're coming from and where that data is being collected. So I do recommend incognito mode because it doesn't save history. Even though data can still be collected, it is a way that you can still kind of, I guess, fight back against that aspect. There is no safe, I will say that there is no safe way or encrypted way that we can completely keep our digital footprint away, even in when we're in incognito mode, but that is something that can help. And just a disclaimer on that too, it doesn't keep your history, so if you're searching something that you want to revisit later, it will not save it, right? So we want to just be mindful of that as well. Putting passwords in, it won't save it in incognito mode, but it does kind of divert that a little bit. I hope that's helpful. Yeah, any questions, follow-up, comments? Yes. Definitely, yeah. I would say having location off is the safest way to go. Not just in terms of data collection and privacy, but also just like protection for yourself. I know it's preference for a lot of people. I know a lot of apps like Instagram recently just did that location feature. So I know we push a lot of like, hey, just turn off your location because it will show exactly where you're at. And if you zoom in, yeah, it'll show like what room you're in, even of the building that you're standing in, right? Stuff like that. So it's definitely a caution to safety. But that's definitely, I would recommend keeping them off until you need them. Yeah. Any last question? I think we have time for maybe one more. Comments. If not, we have our table over here on the left side of the room. Please visit them and take as much as you can. Hand sanitizers, we have chapsticks, we have zines, and also just, again, period product bags that you can take home for your kiddos, for yourself, whatever it is. Feel free to take those. And my card is also on the table, so if you want to contact us for anything or reach out, we do presentation. This is one of 4 presentations that we do cover. The others are sexual health, media literacy. What else do we do?
Oh, I have one.
Yeah.
So just so you know, we will be presenting at the McKinley County Health Council next month, and we'll be doing one of our presentations on reproductive sovereignty. So if you get a chance, I believe it's on either the 2nd or the 3rd Wednesday at like 11 a.m. But yeah, if you would like to join that.
Otherwise, thank you all so much. Thank you for having us, and you have our contact if you ever need to reach us, and we're happy to be, in any place that you welcome us.